referral.
Welcome here tonight. A little bit of a late start, but that happens. All right, any additions or anything we need to add or remove from the agenda?
Mayor, we have one additional claim for the claims list for this, purchase of the school district property for $19,000.
$19,296.
That's the only addition.
Motion approved. Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Visitors to be heard. Anybody want to have 2 minutes to talk this evening? Seeing none, we'll go to the consent agenda.
Move to approve. Second.
Can we have some discussion on this?
Sure.
I was looking through a number of the reports, very good. The water wastewater report, there's one in there regarding, I've heard a little bit more about the Molly. This is a really good report, by the way. I mean, pictures and everything, great. First time that we've gotten that. There's something in there about lift station check valve vaults. Can you speak to that a little bit, Kyle?
Yeah, sure.
Is there supposed to be water in there?
No. They probably shouldn't be submerged. You're just, the lifespan of them is decreasing probably quite a bit by them being submerged. I believe there is a drain port that's supposed to allow the water to pass this, or storm water to pass this and go into the lift station and be put in the collection system. But I believe they were closed because of high INI issues that was experienced in the past, and they were just never reopened.
And it says there's 6 to 8 feet of standing water. They're submerging the valve components. I'm assuming these things rust or?
Oh, yeah, you can. Yep, and that's all your check valves, air release, shut-offs that have been underwater. Did you forward them the PowerPoint? They're just the pictures.
Yeah, I've got a couple pictures.
Okay, yeah. So that kind of explains what we saw there.
And so if the INI is high, they close them so they,
I'm guessing so, because that's allowing the stormwater to go into the lift station. It's all it is, you're opening a valve that would drain that water from the valve vault into a lift station, where then it would pump, anywhere.
and if you open those up then and you
Yeah,
just kind of
so,
drip
and
and
then
empty
just
that
let it
out?
drain out, and
Does it, in your opinion, have they been submerged for a while?
yeah, oh yeah. Years.
I mean, they look, okay. And this is the lift station by the Meadows.
Every one of them has that.
They're all that way.
Yes. Everyone was submerged in 6 to 8 feet of water.
Because all the valves are closed.
Yes. Yep.
How long do you think it's been since they've been open?
I can't say for sure, but by the looks of it, it's been at least a year. I mean, I don't know if they freeze. I don't know. I don't think so. Not that, at least the components or the infrastructure below shouldn't freeze, but I mean, obviously you're probably gonna get some type of ice on top there. I mean, then you're talking cracking of. Yep.
But everything looks pretty good when you.
Yeah, we were able to we caught this because one of the pumps was actually, the check valve wasn't closing, so it was allowing water just to kind of go back through like this. So we were able to actually go down and exercise that check, and luckily it did break loose, but this all probably could have been prevented just by maintenance and inspecting.
And you've got a plan together, obviously.
Oh, we're working on it. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Is that it for those valve ones? Otherwise, we did have electric pump come out, last week Wednesday, and they did the service. We have a service agreement with them to come out, and inspect the pumps, pull them, just because they have the equipment and the training to do that. And we did notice on the main lift station that there is, some infrastructure in the bottom that is old and wearing, and it's allowing water. It's a flange that is able to pull a pump up and then sits back into the flange, and they're called a base. So pretty much the beginning of a discharge pipe that goes up into the waste treatment plant. This flange is old and deteriorating, where it's not making a complete seal, and it's allowing blowback of water every time that pump kicks on, so we're losing, and I confirm this, we're losing about 10% to 20% of capacity that should be going to the plant, just blowing out into the wet well, so. I budgeted, it's on the budget for next year, that number may change, I'm still waiting for a quote. But I have some video if you guys would like to see it, it's pretty severe.
Thanks.
Yep. Is that it?
Any other discussion? All right, roll call, Bowers,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Riley,
Aye.
Welch,
Aye.
Ross,
Aye.
Doherty.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. No old business, on the new business, solid waste hauler license, Ruse Sanitation.
Thank you, Mayor. We received an application and all the supporting materials for roof sanitation. We applied for a solid waste hauler license under our ordinances. If many of you remember, Bruce was here at the last meeting, spoke under public comment, their intent to offer services here in town. On their application, you'll note that they have their rates listed for a 65-gallon tote, $23, and for a 96-gallon tote, $32. I recommend approval.
Second.
Quick question before we move on. What is the impact of having another series of trucks coming into Lennox and traveling on those roads? Does that have an impact?
It could, I mean, there's certain potential there, but I often point back to the fact that 70% of them are already failing. There are roads that are going to need to be replaced regardless. And I don't know if Bruce, I think, if they can speak to the equipment they have, what they're going to use to haul, but I imagine it would be similar equipment to what we see already.
But I think if someone's gonna, I mean, in my opinion, if someone's gonna change vendor, like there's a truck here anyway going down the street. I don't know.
But he's going down
There's
one time to
two.
hit the neighborhood, then
Right.
the other company comes through and hits the
A
neighborhood.
neighborhood, sure.
Now a third company comes through and hits the neighborhood, so it essentially increases it by a third.
Sure.
I'd almost just bring up food for thought. Having a discussion about narrowing that down to one. And trying to negotiate on behalf of the residents to have you're gonna come once a week to all the houses, and the rate's going to be something a little bit better. And it then reduces the traffic on our roads dramatically.
There are certainly plenty of towns that either contract out or limit it to one or two haulers. Our ordinance as it's written right now doesn't restrict it at all. But I think if that's something that the council wishes to have further discussion on in the future, we could certainly do some research and see what it would take to do that.
So we would dictate who our people do business with?
Yes. But if you limit it to one, the council would decide which organization receives that license.
That's annually, I would say.
Any other discussion? So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. Planning and zoning commission resignation.
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier this month, we received a verbal resignation from the Planning and Zoning Commission from Darren Olson. Recommend accepting that resignation.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. So the next, we have planning and zoning commission appointment. And I did speak with Brett Winya, so I would entertain a motion to approve the appointment of Brett Winya to the next planning and zoning commission.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Oh,
Maybe we need a determination on who the second came from.
Oh,
Bill.
Yeah,
Bill.
Okay.
One of the bills.
Right. Flip a coin.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Fire department roster.
Thank you, Mayor. This one is on me. Our last roster that we had in front of the council 2 weeks ago inadvertently admitted one of the members of the fire department. We'd like to add him back onto that coverage as soon as possible. So recommend a motion to approve.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Agreement for certified water wastewater operator.
Thank you, Mayor. As you all know, we've talked about it several times. We need to have an agreement in place in September for a licensed operator for water and sewer to maintain compliance with our permit for drinking water and wastewater. So when our last licensed operator left, we've been operating without that required level of licensure. The state generally gives us 6 months to secure the person or the license that we need to run our system. I have no doubt that our staff will achieve that level of licensure. In fact, they took their test again last week, but it'll be several weeks before we hear back. Regardless, we're approaching that 6-month mark by which we have to have somebody in place. So the DNR will review these agreements in September, and we need to have something in place by the time of that meeting. So between other staff and myself, we contacted several individuals and firms and requested estimates to provide the service with responses due last week, Thursday. The only response we received was from Stockwell Engineering. And I've attached that proposal to this memo. Since Friday, that should have been updated. So there's some new language in there. Further revisions, I think, are probably going to be made necessary to incorporate some of the DNR language, but we can work that out with Stockwell and the DNR just to make sure that they were okay with this. And I would like to clarify some of the separation. Like the revised contract of a 6-month separation period, I'd like to get that narrowed down if we can, to whether it's 30 days or 60 days, but as of the licensure of our staff, I'd like that to sunset a certain time after that. Next year, this contract will cost approximately $77,000, approximately $25,000 per remainder of this year. That's approximately 12 hours of services per week, if I remember correctly. And this does need to be approved by the city attorney as well. So I don't know if Stockwell is here today. I don't know if John or Annette, you want to speak to that?
Hi guys, John, for new council members, I'm John Brown, Stockwell Engineers. I work with Mitch. We put together a proposal. This is a new venture for us, just so you guys are all aware of that. We were able to hire a plant operator, and I did hand out 5 copies of our brochure. I apologize for that. I didn't have 6 or 7. Apologize, but anyway, that brochure really summarizes our water and wastewater treatment capabilities. But more importantly, I think, we estimated what it would take to help with the operations of your plant, as well as your collection system and distribution system on the water side. And so this proposal is comprehensive for both the water and the wastewater. And it will also help Kyle estimate some of the things, which we did anyway, but make some other recommendations for upgrades to lift stations, maybe expansions of lift stations and things like that. So, and the treatment facility. So that's all part of this agreement. As far as what Nate was referring to, there's some language that needs to be incorporated into this agreement that's compliant with the DNR. And we think we're close. We just need to make sure we're all tied in together with that. So, but our agreement, this agreement would finish out this year and then have 1 full season after that. Initially, we had submitted a 3.5-year agreement, but since you're so close to possibly having an operator on board, that's why we backed it off those 2 years at the end. You can always terminate at any point if you need to, so that's certainly your prerogative if you'd like, if you get someone else or decide to go a different route. So it's important to realize that you're still the owner of the permit. So you're still as a city, the owner of the permit. We are your operator, so we'll be contracted to operate your facility for you, but we are not the permit holder. You are still the permit holder, and that's very clear in the DNR's requirements, that you maintain the ownership, if you will, of the permit, so.
I would add just one note to that. We own the system, that operator owns his license. And it's very important to them to maintain compliance with the system for them personally and professionally. So, and it's not just the city that shares responsibility for what's happening. That operator would as well.
So, and what you have in front of you is our brochure for environmental services. That's both our water and wastewater treatment, like I said earlier. We'll get you an electronic copy of that. I'll email that to you, Nate, so you can distribute that. I'd open it up to any questions if you have any.
So right now, there's a 6-month termination notice.
6 months is
And
on.
that's what you were
We'll work
referring
with
to.
you.
Okay.
If you want it
Okay.
sooner, I mean,
I just wanted to clarify that, so he was.
Yeah.
How far out are we on our guys getting licensed?
Hopefully within a week.
And then you'll be a level 3?
Yes.
Now, keep in mind, we have to make sure we have licenses in 3 areas.
So there's water distribution and collection, so, I have a class 1 water distribution, we're required for class 2, but I have all the required contact hours to take these tests. So,
The pass rate on the first time for that class 3 test is 18%.
18?
Yes.
it's a tough one.
So, while we have an all-star operator, it takes some time. Again, I have no doubt we'll get there.
and we talked it over with Nate. We actually feel that it would be beneficial to even you guys to have that overlap of next year. Let's say that everything came together and you got your license by the end of the year, first part of next year. As you guys remember, going through the spring of the year is the most difficult time with your treatment facility. And so I guess, felt that it was pretty important to have that partnership going through that year, next year. And then, if we end up cutting it short from there, we certainly can.
So I assume you're leasing this guy out to other
We're
places?
trying to, yeah, that's our intent. So this is, like I said, this is a new venture for us, and yeah, it's a consultant work for basically just like we do today.
What kind of
It's just a
experience
new,
does he have?
he's a guy, what's that?
What kind of experience does he have?
He's operated, if you look in the handout that I handed you there, he's operated multiple wastewater treatment facilities, both private and public. And he helps out with, the more important thing to remember there is on the private side, you don't have as much redundancy built into your systems. And so municipal side treatment is a little bit, generally, you've got redundancy built in, so you have a little more safeguards built into the systems. So he's done a fair amount of actual private wastewater treatment facilities in both, for Smithfield, he's worked at, right now he's working at the food processing plant, can't remember the beef jerky place, but he's helping out the beef, yeah. So he's helping out, some beef jerky, so that's high concentration, so there's a lot of specifics. And so I guess what we would, he's very qualified, he's a class 4, he has to be, to make that classification. Our water treatment side guy is the same thing, he's a class 4, he ran the city of Sioux Falls' water treatment plant and their water system. And so he's hired on our side too, he's the water side of things, not the wastewater.
And we
On
get
water,
access to
we've been-
both?
What's that?
We get access to both?
Yes, yep.
On water, we've actually already been working with Greg quite a bit on the water loss issue, trying to narrow some of that stuff down, and having his insight and background expertise and going through some of these water audits in Sioux Falls has been very helpful in trying to pinpoint some of those issues.
You're gonna find those guys really helpful for your maintenance guys, just because they speak the language and they really dial in on what the concerns are.
Does the person on the wastewater side have any SBR experience?
Yes, he does.
Okay.
Yes.
Has he looked at our plan at all?
He is not. We have before.
You maybe want to
Before
run
we
it.
got him.
You don't want to scare him off.
We already
Right.
scared him a little bit, but no.
Ryan Truex has been out.
Yeah, supposedly it's real easy, so. Famous last word, right? So, no, I think, he feels very confident that, he won't have any issues with that, so. I think you're gonna find us making some recommendations, and we'll put those in writing for you to consider, some improvements. There's one of the slide gates we think should be a downward opening instead of an upward opening. That's something that could, be taken care of. Some other things out there at that plant that we would recommend you do so that it makes it easier to operate. And, the big thing that, we've been talking about, is possibly an equalization basin. But to do an equalization basin, you still need to make some other improvements to the lift station that Kyle was talking about. And that is to possibly add another pump in there. So you can get all your waste out to the plant as long as you got an EQ basin to go to. So, equalization basin. So, but we'll talk about that in a little more detail if you guys approve this to go forward.
So what I would recommend tonight, given that the city attorney hasn't fully reviewed this yet, is a motion to approve pending acceptable language with the city attorney and Stockwell.
So moved.
Second.
Can the budget handle it?
Yes.
Any other discussion?
More importantly, the budget can't not handle it.
We'll do a roll call. Doherty.
Aye.
Ross.
Abstain?
Welch.
Aye.
Riley.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Bowers.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
And I'll send you an electronic copy of that so it can get distributed. So, we might have copies.
Is it on the website?
It is not this environmental package, but you can see all of our individuals on the website, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Next, we have sewer televising and cleaning pay app 2.
Yep, pay app number 2 in your packets, 2 pipe protectives. At this stage, they have the majority of the pipe televised, and we've got reports back in our office that we're starting to go through. We've gone through and they cross-reference to make sure that they got all the pipes. There are a few pipes they have to come back and finish, specifically the one that kind of goes Kinney Corner across the Damon property. There was crop in that ground, so they didn't want to disturb that, so they'll be coming back and televising that area. So at this point, we recommend, they've got about 80% complete. And so that reflects the pay app and withholding 10% retainage on them. So we recommend the payment of this application of $24,590.53.
So moved.
Second.
What are they finding?
Well, the one spot that Nate was talking about is on Elm Street. It is the whole top half of the main is gone. So you can see it up into the, just the bare earth. We found probably, I would say at least 3 locations that look like that. There's one on Main Street too, and I can't remember the other ones. But what we're trying to do right now is go through a cursory review, because they flag all the major items that they see. So we're trying to get through those items right now. And so we can start having conversations if we need to make any emergency repairs to those areas. 'Cause
When can we expect to be here?
I'd say
Like next week?
probably next week. And the way I want to approach it is I think we're gonna have some areas that we just need to get in there. We don't dare wait on them, so.
You have that picture of,
At the office, yeah, I'm not
I can't remember if you texted it or,
I think
if you texted or did.
I thought I texted it to you once on time.
And you think that's between, third and
It's
fourth?
Between
or
second and third,
Between second and third?
yeah.
It's only 1915 pipe.
Yeah.
It's relatively new.
Yeah, and then there's some areas even up that way that you can see fractures in the pipe, which are concerning, but maybe not in the realm of having to fix it immediately. But yeah, that's the one that we're speaking about. And this isn't too far away from the school that is working, so we think it'd be good to just get them over there and dig it up and fix it.
This line?
You can actually see the piece. The top half of that pipe is just down the pipe too.
Okay.
So yeah, you can see it.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, just to understand the I, when it rains, it pours, right? And so then it comes down into the ground, just goes into the pipe, and off it goes to the wastewater plant, right?
And you pay to get it treated.
And then fine, because we can't remove enough.
The report we did hit the 85% removal again last month.
I'm anxious to see that.
So once we do get through those tertiary big items, it's gonna take us some time to go through, cut all the videos, because there's a lot to go through. But we get a report from the pipe companies and they flag everything as they go, but we also wanna just look through the videos and make sure they didn't miss anything. So that process will take longer to get through all of them. And it's probably something we'll do this winter when we have some of our field people coming from the field.
With a pipe like that, can you just go in and spot fix,
Yes, that's what we'll propose doing there.
or is the rest of the pipe just going to fall apart when it migrates?
And it looked like it was still intact, those pieces, we didn't see any fractures, but it's quite tight, they have to be careful around it, but there's couplings and there's procedures to put that back together.
Assume anything's better than that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Curious, with clay pipe like that, how much of it is clay pipe that is mineral?
And you're in the city?
Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, when we go through your television reports, and we've got history here on your maps here, I haven't actually pulled any numbers, but it's gotta be 20 to 30%.
A lot of that's been resolved in the past 5 years with the Central Basin projects,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, and you got some newer subdivisions over here,
Yeah.
maybe that are PVC. So it's probably a lot of the core areas still is clay pipes.
Even north of railroad tracks in that area, from, I would say, First to Boynton, there's a fair number of blocks, I guess I would say, where there's PVC. There's still some clay over there,
Yeah.
but there's some older PVC that we have there as well.
All right. Yeah.
Anything else? Roll call, Bowers?
Right.
Oh, sorry, we didn't have a motion yet. Do we have, yes, we have a
Yeah.
motion,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yep.
Bowers, aye, okay. Wolf?
Aye.
Riley?
Right.
Welch? Ross?
Aye.
Doherty?
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. Thanks, Mitch. Ordinance 612, park board composition and appointment.
Thank you, Mayor. Issue for this one, Mayor and Council indicated a desire at the last meeting to include some rural areas surrounding Lennox and eligibility for service on the park board. So I researched this issue at the request of the mayor in coordination with the requirement to appoint park board members in September. Our current ordinance requires members to reside within city limits of Lennox. That best represents the tax-paying public, but at the same time, our recreation programs include outlying areas outside of our municipal boundaries, typically within the Lennox School District boundaries. So this ordinance would revise chapter 1.0602 of our ordinance to require those members to reside within the boundaries of the Lennox School District and not within the municipal boundaries. This would open up membership opportunities and improve interest in board service. I recommend a motion to approve the first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Billy and Billy.
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Resolution 2020-08-24-01, Transportation Alternatives Grant Application.
Thank you, Mayor. This one's a mouthful. Transportation alternatives funding is to expand the current multi-use trail to go down Boynton Avenue from Highway 17 to Juniper. We actually had our walkthrough on this with DOT staff 2 or 3 weeks ago. Walkthrough went relatively well. Obviously, some issues of note. That road is traveled heavily. 2,300 vehicles a day is our average from this spring. There's really no pedestrian facilities along that stretch of road. While we were walking, in fact, traffic backed up behind the group on the walking tour for the site visit because there was just no space for them to get through with two lanes of traffic. So This grant would provide 82% of the funding to expand that trail to a 10-foot wide trail from Highway 17 to Juniper. Recommending motion to approve.
This go on the east side or the west side?
North side.
I'm sorry, north side or south, north side?
And you mentioned prior that we've got landowner interest in this. Like take over some land, correct?
Yeah, to do the project right, to widen White Avenue the way we would want to, we would have to do some right-of-way acquisition. I think 17 feet is, if I remember right, was what we would have to acquire. But I think there are some existing opportunities to take care of half of that already, so.
Great.
Motion approved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Finance accounting software.
Thank you. So currently we have Banyan for our accounting software and it is written in Access. Microsoft has threatened to not support Access before, but rumor has it that they're gonna they're not going to support Access in 2021. I have talked to Banyan on several occasions and asked them what they're planning to do, whether they're going to program, rewrite, and they tell me that they have something in the works, but they won't tell us what. I don't want to wait till 2021 to find out that they don't have a backup plan in progress and Microsoft stops supporting Access. So I went ahead and I actually looked at two different companies. One was Cassell, and they're out of Utah. They have a cloud-based accounting system, which was very good. We were very impressed. Nate liked it, I liked it. Evelyn and Dawn really were impressed with it. The problem with it is that they're 18 months out, and they wouldn't be able to do any type of a conversion, nothing. And I just can't wait 18 months. So the second one that we looked at was Simple City. They used to be Summit. They were taken over by G-Works. They're out of Omaha, Nebraska, and several cities in South Dakota have this software. So I have visited with several different cities on how they like it, how they like support, that type of thing. It's come back well. They are in the process of writing a cloud-based accounting system. So by next year, by the end of 2021, they should be completely cloud-based for all of their modules. I think everybody got my little comparison there as far as cost basis. Simple City is going to cost a little bit more to upfront to get it up and running, but their yearly maintenance is about a third of what Cassell would be going forward after, and they will allow us to pay for the whole implementation and the maintenance in 2 years. So that's why I have it broken down, January of 2021, January 2022, and then starting in 2023, that's when it would go down to the 11,000.
Would that 11,000 be based on their cloud-based implementation?
They are telling me yes. I have asked that in particular, because if that's the case, it's very cheap.
Right, well.
So, that's where and he's telling me yes.
Okay.
They haven't talked about any type of price increase, or he hasn't said anything with that. Yeah. And we have we have it listed out here through 2022, and it still includes the 11,370.
So one of
So
the
my-
things that we don't talk about in this comparison is opportunity cost, and cost of what we're currently doing. I would say on a weekly basis, we lose at least 2 to 3 hours of productivity with system shutdowns, system blackouts, system backups that go wrong, Can't get in, can't get out. I mean, it's a, it is a
Evelyn,
nightmare
yeah,
to work with.
Evelyn especially with utilities, she crashes at least 4 times a day. I crash usually on 2 to 3 times a day.
I use that one time a month because it's all I want.
I have figured out how to go in and do it so that we don't have to call in and wait for a half an hour, 45 minutes for them to call us back to go through this little routine of, you know, oh, the database locked, but, you know, it's not our fault, it's your fault. And I really think that, it's because we're on a server, we have, you know, workstations where if we had a standalone computer, I think it would be fine, but it just can't handle the number of people.
Banyan you're talking about. So we can currently do our building permits out of Banyan?
We can, but we do not.
Yeah, it's a difficult software that we have.
Code enforcement?
We can, but we do not.
Okay.
And
It's just, part of it's usability.
Gotcha. I just noticed that
Majority of
right
it is
for the
just-
web, they currently don't have it right now, so.
One of the things that I brought up with Banyan, if I'm doing code enforcement, I have a building inspector doing building inspections, what good is it for me to have him out in the field if he can't have his technology with him? You can't, you're taking pictures, you're making notes, you have reports, we can't do any of that until we would get back to a desktop computer, not even on our laptops or iPads.
Have you gotten any testimonials from other municipalities regarding Cassell?
There's only one other city in South Dakota that uses Cassell, and that is it Sturgis? Yeah, I think it's Sturgis. And they've been with them for quite a while. She said that she likes the software. She said it's almost too powerful. She goes, I don't use half of what it can capably do. But again, you know, they were looking for more South Dakota cities, but I'm like, and I kind of begged and pleaded with them that, you know, could you just, you know, even if we could get utility billing on it first and then move, but they were looking at, you know, anywhere from 8 months to 14 months just to get utility billing on. Well, the reason I want to switch is because of the way that Banyan is and what's going on there. And I don't want to just switch because, you know, we need to right now. I have looked at Simple City and they are talking about going to a cloud-based system, which I think will be good. You know, and this is something that we can grow with and move forward with, so we can have it on the server to begin with, and then as it moves into the cloud base, those modules will go into the cloud base and we'll move with that. So they're working on the code enforcement right now for the web, and so we'll move right into that web-based module when that comes out.
And is Simple City able to do their startup and implementation so rapidly because they're so well established?
Partly, what they will do is they actually have time, so we're gonna actually have them install the software this year on our system so that we can run side by side, so that we know by January we are ready to go and we don't have to pay Banyan for their support. We just move right into Simple City and move forward. And that to me is, you know, I'm not sure why they can do it so quickly. They have a lot of South Dakota cities and they do a lot with the South Dakota ways that what we do.
Simple City wasn't one Summit, right?
Yes.
So Summit,
Was.
longer-term members may recall, we used Summit like 5 years ago.
Something like that.
Sometime in the past 10 years, we used Summit here. I don't know why we switched over. I couldn't tell you, but it is a good system. Simple City, I sat in on, I think, 2 of their demos, one on their actual software and one on their reporting side. And very impressive, very powerful reporting. You know, one of my pet peeves is not being able to, today, pick up an app, go in there, find out exactly what our expense and revenue is in X department for the year, for the month, for the week. That we can do that with.
The Cassell group being booked out so far, is it because they have some features that are superior to Simple City?
I don't know if it's that, you know, they're nationwide, so they have, I mean, I think they have quite a few cities that they're doing, and that's why the wait, is so long. Simple City or G-Works is pretty much Midwest area. I don't know if they've really branched out anywhere beyond, you know.
I think this is their first big attempt to do that. G-Works has been around for a number of years, but where I got to know them was on the Public Works GIS side. In fact, it kind of became a joke when I was sitting here, Chad from G-Works would call every week. You know, someday we'll be ready for this, but I think G-Works itself started off as a smaller company. You know, Gravity Summit, I think, was a more Simple City. Was a huge get for them. I think it's kind of allowing them to spread that out.
So are larger companies like Microsoft or SAP or Oracle, do they do stuff like this, or they're just way too expensive, or?
They do. I mean, there's a lot of other companies that do, at least purely accounting software, no doubt about that. And we talked about Great Plains,
Software Unlimited.
Software Unlimited, which a lot of the schools have. But none of them are really set up for the wide array of things that we have to do here. You know, a lot of those larger companies are going to be set up primarily for profit, Fortune 500 companies, those types of things.
Like the cost on it would be, you know,
Way more.
way more. Yeah. So this is affordable and functionable, and I think it'll do what we needed to. Simple City did show me their purchase order module where I can have the department heads, because they have unlimited users. So with their security, I can go in and drill down and give each department head just what they are responsible for. They can go out and actually create their own purchase orders, which then once we can print them off, match up the invoice to it, and then that actually gets downloaded into the accounts payable. So we're not double entering. They're putting in the purchase order, we're verifying the amount and making sure that it's correct, but they're coding so that it goes to where they want it to go and gets expensed out that way.
So what would be your recommendation to the board?
Simple City, just because we can go ahead and get it in and going and up and running. And I think it will grow with us just fine.
What I would recommend on top of that is a motion not to exceed amount, the quote amount. I think we need to, want to go back, make sure that we've got our math completely correct. And if there's places where we can trim, we'll do that. Right. But my recommendation would be a motion not to exceed the quote amount.
Motion to approve the amount quoted for Simple City.
Second.
Okay.
Any more discussion? The roll call. Raps,
Aye.
Welch,
Aye.
Riley, Doherty,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Powers.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Resolution 2028-10-01, street maintenance fee.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm recognizing now that this probably should have been under old business, not new business, but we did have some changes to this resolution. So it fits, I think. I won't go through the whole number like we did last time. We did make some adjustments to the projections. I would like to spend some time looking at that if we could. So after the last meeting, we were directed to take a look at, timelines, a variety of timelines, as well as a graduated commercial assessment. I threw some more variables into that as well. I removed gravel streets from the total amount of linear streets replaced, but did keep it, it is in the total amount of linear feet for the community, so that it stays in there in terms of linear feet that's assessed. Also, eliminated, an estimated amount of linear feet for schools, churches, nonprofits, government properties, those kinds of things. And what we come up with are a number of different projections there. At the current rate, with what we have available in Second Penny, you can plan on approximately 92 years to replace all of the failable or failing streets that we're looking at. By that time, no doubt more of those streets will be in that category. A flat fee of $2 will get us 24 years, $2.60 gets us 20 years, and $3.75 flat gets us to 15 years. On the graduated commercial front, there's a lot of different options we could go through here. What I did is I assumed that the commercial rate was going to be double the residential rate. So at $350 for commercial and $175 for residential, you get to 25 years. $475 commercial, $237 residential, you get to 20 years. At $675 commercial and $337 residential, you get to 15 years. The resolution that I've got in front of you tonight puts that rate at $2.60, so it gets us to 20 years. I think it's a discussion for the council to have at which level a fee of this nature is palatable and what's tolerable for the community. So I open it up for discussion.
What have you heard around town? Anybody specific or in terms of this idea?
I talked to a few people. Feedback I got was pretty consistent with the exception of one outlier who said he would pay whatever it would cost him to get city streets, regardless of the amount. So we're not gonna take that too seriously, but basically the feedback I got, and it took some explaining, I guess, because this is new, right? For them to really understand where this is coming from. I kind of give them brief history, because initially, my memory serves me correct, we talked about this as more of in our initial conversations, a way to pay for maintenance. And then kind of, how do we replace streets on top of just slurry sealing and pothole fixing and everything else. Feedback I got, they understood a linear foot assessment for maintenance, would not be much support for repair or replace. Reason being, they felt property owners should be assessed for a portion of it. Lots of other people in town previously have been assessed on projects, and we've had this conversation before. There's really been no consistency over the last however many projects, how we do things.
You refer to special assessment?
Special assessment, yes.
And I got the same feedback. I mean, I had a couple say, look, for this particular family, it's like, I'm gonna pay $200 a year over the next 20 years. We have all new streets, I'm all in. But then I've got a couple that say, well, I just had my street redone and I'm a corner lot and I paid $7,500 already for my
On the special assessment.
on the special assessment. Now I feel like I'm gonna get double whammy. And I shared with this individual too, like I'm in the same boat. Like my street got redone. I had to pay a special assessment for some of my street. And then I'm willing to, if we can get this city all kind of an altruistic approach. And my argument is this. I don't get carried, when I come onto my street, I don't get picked up from a drone and dropped off on Highway 17. Like, I gotta get out there. So I'm traversing multiple streets in the community, and and so, in that regard, it's like, some of us have to bite the bullet, like we're gonna get dinged twice. And just because of the way we've done things in the past, it sucks. I'm one of them, but that's my personal opinion. I feel, as we talk about this, special assessment, like, I think they took this route in Hartford. I think they did a linear footage, and then they basically went from house to house and said, hey, look, we're doing this part of town. This is where we're gonna get here. This is what's going to be assessed to you. If you like it, you stay. If you don't like it, you have a chance to sell your house. But that's the route that Hartford took. I just think at the end of the day, we have to have a timeline that's reasonable. We have to have a financial package that makes sense. And I think you're always gonna get naysayers, and I completely understand those that have things redone. They've already been dinged once with a special assessment, and now we're gonna add another between $2,500, $3,500 to a new street.
I would add with, speaking of the difference between street maintenance fee and special assessment, for those streets that are gravel, on a curb and gutter, on a sidewalk, on good boulevard, that would still all be special assessed. When you think of the street maintenance fee being used for reconstruction, rehabilitation, those kind of things, I would say look at streets such as, Rumble, which water code, no curb and gutter, 50/50 sidewalk, maybe. We would use special assessments in conjunction with the street maintenance fee to finish off the appropriate cross-section of that street.
I talked to a few people, and the concern is that $2 a foot really gonna go to street maintenance? And there's a lot of distrust there. Just take more of my money. And how do I know it's gonna be spent on that? In addition to that, there's people, like, I've lived here 25 years and never has anything been done on my street. So, okay, we're gonna take $2 a foot, but what's the plan? Like, tell me when you're gonna come do my street. And so, I mean, that's valid. I mean, we're just not gonna be collecting your money and saying, we're not sure we're gonna be here, maybe we've got 25 years, you know?
I totally get to it.
I mean,
I think it's important with, I mentioned that I'd like to get started on, I've actually started some of the work on a 5-year CIP.
but not all the streets are gonna be in the 5 years.
No, absolutely not.
So then when's my street gonna be on there?
Right.
I mean, that's,
And there is a separate fund that we can put the money to,
Absolutely.
yes.
and we can set that up, and that is not a problem.
And I explained that to a few people, and they said, well, I thought that's what it was already done, when the second penny, that should have only been for streets.
Well, we do have a second penny, and that is its own fund, but
Right, but
But it has other allowable uses.
I said it could be in a fund that would only be used for streets, and I think that would help alleviate.
I think what we would recommend doing is absolutely putting that street maintenance fee revenue into this segregated restricted fund, as well as the amount set aside for the second penny. So if we say $200,000 in FY '21, the second penny is going to street repair, street maintenance, that gets transferred over into that restricted use fund.
West Fourth Street keeps popping into my head.
The gravel portion.
Yes, that has all new, that was in one of the projects, right? Central Base.
Underground's been done.
Yeah, that was,
Up to and then west of there, it's not.
yeah, and there's gravel from there.
But I think, Bill, you're saying underground's been done.
Underground.
Underground has been done.
Curb and gutter.
Yes.
All the way out.
All the way to Cleveland, yes.
What was the history? Why did that one not get paved?
There's a majority landowner, from my understanding, on the project that, quite frankly, if you own enough property on the project, you can oppose the special assessment.
Yeah, the council did a resolution necessity, and it got protested by the majority of the people back there.
And they do it by linear footage, right? Percentage of linear footage. And there's nothing the city can do about that, or is there something that can be,
I mean, when they protest the assessment, then that means you can't, a city can still do the project.
well, yeah, right, you just can't assess, right?
Those statutes have changed though in the last 5 years now, where I think they call the supermajority of the council can override that protest.
Okay.
And back then, I don't think that was in place, so the council
I think digging into what Hartford did, what T did, whoever else around here, what they've done, and talk to those communities. I mean, they seem to get it done in a pretty quick time, and I think it had a lot to do with scheduling, letting the homeowners know, we're gonna do this section of town at this time this year, you know, so they can save for the special assess. I mean, I think the street maintenance thing is a great idea, but to me, it's kind of misleading. It's not really a street maintenance fee now, it's more of a street replacement.
Eventually someday it would be maintenance.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we need, but we need all good-looking streets to start with. We don't have that.
I didn't weigh in on that 250 was it, or 260, whatever.
260.
The whole engineer was, you know, we helped with that number, and it really, we looked at what it would take to maintain a street once it's been reconstructed, to do your seal coat every 7 years. What gets that number up there is then to do an overlay. That's really the improvement down the road that nobody's planning for, and that becomes it's not full reconstruction, but it's still an expensive cost to pay for. And so on those instances where they've had their street reconstructed, that 250 is really to continue maintenance on that street that's been reconstructed.
When we do get to a point where we've got, you know, we've got 16 miles of streets, and how long is a slurry seal coat?
7 years.
7 years, yeah. So, I mean, every 7 years, you've got to either turn that over or mill it overlay at 15 years, give or take. Milling overlay isn't even something we can even consider on most of our streets at this point, because of the subpart construction level.
Yeah.
You guys have any thoughts on this?
So let's put a percentage on it, let's say, I know you threw out 60% or whatever streets were in disrepair.
So,
70. What percentage of that is block? All of it?
no, you've got,
Just a rough idea.
you've got, you know, a mile, give or take, of gravel, maybe a mile and a half of gravel, with not coming more than
I would guess half of it.
We can go on by what we're talking about here, 15-year plan for the maintenance fee. If we need to do something every 7 years, so that's 2 terms of that you're not doing anything, because you're pouring it all into new streets. So then you got 2 groups of streets that never got it and they should have. I mean, obviously, we won't do that, but
yeah, you could get to a point where you're backlogged again. Okay, you could never catch up with that backlog as possible. I would still plan on significant property and sales tax growth over that time frame.
yeah.
That'll help quite a bit. I don't think we're ever going to be as strong in sales tax as some communities in rural Southwood are, simply because of our proximity to St. Paul's. But I do believe we'll be growing significantly in that area just in the next 5 years.
And one thing about the special assessment, I mean, you had a long history of doing special assessments on projects. Because the Central Basin 2 and 3 were the only ones that you have done a special assessment on. And so I really think a healthy way to do it is still implement special assessments, the combination of the maintenance fee.
How much does that offset this 260?
250, yeah, 250 is right.
The 260 is just maintenance, seal coats and normal release in the future. If you wanted to try to do a maintenance fee to do rehab work, you'd be maybe way up there, way past that number.
I'm a little confused, as the 260 here is giving us a 20-year turnaround, years to complete, and that's not years to complete maintenance.
That's years to complete reconstruction.
Correct. And then the special assessment, per Chad's question, offsets what portion of the 260? If it takes 20 years at 260,
Sure. So I'm recommending using that 260 for reconstruction.
Right.
What Mitch is talking about is using 250 for pure maintenance. Seal coats, crack sealing, mill and overlay. reconstruction to be special assessed.
But in our first pretty few years of collecting that, you don't have a lot of streets in need of a steel coat or milling. We got Main Street on the south end, but in the first few years, you might not have, you gotta do a lot of catching up. So that's where we thought the first few years of collecting that 250 could be used to reconstruct a few areas and get them to a place where now we can maintain them. And then that 260, definitely, and to me, you'd have to increase that 260 by an inflationary rate too, as time goes on to keep up with inflation. But I think that's what was part of the mindset too, was these first few years, we'd be generating some reserve money that we could start using towards some of those projects. But I don't think the special assessments really has been, I get the sense that you guys have talked a lot about the maintenance fee, and maybe there's, an appetite for that, but we really haven't dived into what the appetite is for special assessments and how to approach those in future projects. Because to me, if you rehab a job, we should be talking about special assessments with those two.
I guess I'm confused, because if we're talking 260 to reconstruct over 20 years, right?
Does that leave zero money for maintenance if we're using it all to reconstruct?
So you're basically looking at $5 between the two, special assessment and the maintenance fee for
If you were
streets.
going to cover both, yes.
Because don't we,
You need to be saving some money to be able to bite off the minimum overlay at year 20 usually.
It's like 200 to about 400.
And what you're talking about doing is if you're simply gonna do all these projects out to maintenance, you will be using all that money, not saving for that minimum overlay project.
Right.
That's where I think the special assessments have to come in.
how much does the center been generate every year roughly right now?
320.
And about 100 of that, or a portion of that goes to offset ambulance.
To ambulance?
Yeah,
Yes.
And pool.
and pool.
No, third penny.
Third penny.
Something
Yeah.
was in the pool.
Yeah.
Was there a discussion, or you've got on here 20-year graduated with commercial? What are your thoughts on that?
I did bring it up at the most recent Development Corporation meeting, presented it. There was no discussion, I heard no questions.
Did I hear you say you pulled out all that we wouldn't charge the churches and the schools this fee?
Nonprofit schools, churches, government properties would be pulled out.
Are we allowed to charge them?
We are.
What's the thought then behind the removal of all three of them?
There are some communities that'll pull that out, and some don't. In terms of schools in particular, it's just another taxing entity, so either way, that's passed on to the taxpayer. But in terms of churches and nonprofits, that's something I've seen pulled out, and some keep it in, some don't.
And they don't typically pay the property tax.
Right,
They don't-
they're exempt from property
And I
tax.
can see that with churches without issue, that's good quality life stuff for us, but with what schools have with buses on their main routes, I thought, I would expect them to be a participant.
Sure.
What about the traffic they bring?
Right. To the events. Right, when we're talking about their street frontage, it's significant, yeah.
Yeah.
And these numbers reflect that being taken out, because
Yes.
like you said, that's numbers.
It's an estimate, but yes.
And this decision is an infinitum. There's no finality here. This is assessed and we go.
It needs to be approved every year.
But it's, once we start it, we've basically then gonna build a budget based on it.
Yes.
So
Yes.
there's some weight here in this decision.
I have a question, so is Boynton and Cleveland, and, are those considered along that 16 miles?
No, Boynton is not a city.
Boynton is not?
Cleveland
How-
counts.
So those,
Excuse me, Boynton, west of the railroad grade essentially, is a township road.
In Cleveland, the county.
County.
so those frontages are not counted in this 16
Correct.
miles? As is 44 and 17 or not?
Correct.
And then Nielsen development is counted in these numbers,
It's estimated, yes.
estimated. So if this was passed and those lots are plotted, does that Does that start the clock ticking on the developer to pay those fees right away?
Yeah,
As soon as it's platted, you know. Is it something that's, how often is it collected? Maintenance fee?
it'd be collected annually on the property.
So depending on when they're platted, it comes through the, things first year.
Can you talk more, Mitch, about special assessments? You said we've got an extensive history in this community with using special assessments.
Yeah, in your, in you guys' history, when I first came on, we were doing Sixth Street, and there was a special assessment there that was from Main Avenue, out to the highway, it was that stretch of road. And so a special assessment, you simply take the value of what you're constructing, curb and gutter, asphalt, whatever improvements those are, put them on a cost per foot, and then the idea is that's improving that property along there, and they should, be responsible for, their fair share of that road. I remember the assessments range from, some properties got to full curb and gutter, they maybe had a sidewalk, maybe didn't have a sidewalk, so it was all prorated, so if you had a sidewalk, you didn't have to pay for a sidewalk. So the ranges of the dollars per foot varied from, I want to say the lowest was maybe 40, 50. But I remember as we got up to like the Good Sam stretch there, that was in the $100 per foot was their assessment. I think on average, a lot of them were around $70 a foot. I know previously did Center Street and Cherry Street, and I know there was assessments on those projects, but I don't know what they looked like or what range of value they were, but I assume they were about the same. From there you did Main Street, or actually Central Basin 1, and there was assessment on there. I believe the city started to prorate a little bit more. So I think the range of assessments there were $30 to $50 a foot.
So with the original 70-ish that you mentioned,
Yeah.
let's say we put it on you for a year, we give you a year to figure it out.
So the city will put you can pay it upfront right away, or you can put it on your tax roll and get collected over 20 years, whatever you guys set it up for.
You could put some people paid a portion of it.
Yep, so you as a city select that timeframe, and you select the rate that you're gonna collect on, so if it's 5%, 7%. A lot of towns, when we were working with Hartford, they had theirs out there around 70% to encourage people to get their own loans to pay it off, or to encourage them to pay it off right away, just so it didn't take funds away from the city. But those are the things that you decide when you do a special assessment. And then depending on each person, they choose whether they're going to pay it right away. They have 30 days to pay it before it goes on to the taxes, and even once it's on the taxes, they have the ability to pay that off at any given time.
All right, I interrupted, then you were talking about shifting to a prorated style.
Yeah, so when they did Central Basin 1, it kind of came back to what do you do where we have these streets that are hard surface, okay, but it's not 4-inch asphalt, not like our standards are now and what was going to be constructed. So the city made a policy that basically, I think we cored those areas, and if we found some areas we found there was 2 inches of water coat, and they prorated that asphalt. So if we were planting 4 inches, they only paid for a 2-inch as of asphalt, because the idea was they had 2 inches before that. Okay. On Sixth Street, they didn't do that. I think that was water coat as well, but people only paid the full 4 inches. So there's been some subtle changes like that to each assessment. From there, they did Main Street. Main Street was very similar to that first Central Basin project. I think they ranged from $30 to $50 a foot. And then to the phase 2 and phase 3 with no assessment on the project. And how that came to be, I think it had to do with how they approached their funding app with the DNR. They pledged a surcharge rather than
Special assessment.
special assessment. And for what reasons, I don't know. So that's kind of been your history with special. I would say you've had a history of doing special assessments, but the structure of it has varied quite a bit.
If, you know, let's just say the average lot is, frontage is 70 foot, and you mentioned roughly $70 on special assessment per linear foot, right?
You know,
So that's $5,600 to that property owner.
yeah.
I think the blowback I'm getting is when people look at that, they're saying, okay, that property owner, I mean, any property owner in this town is responsible for their sidewalk, their curb and gutter, and portion of that road. Fair to say, right? If you buy a lot in a new development, that's figured into the price of your
Yep.
lot. What I'm getting back is, okay, they can understand that. Now, that's the price to have, start a road from scratch essentially, or repair it to new. They understand there's maintenance costs associated with that. But then they look at the other side, I'm taking my 80-foot lot, I'm paying $2.60 per linear foot for 20 years. And that's reconstructing roads, but we still aren't anywhere further on maintenance.
Yeah, it's a difficult conversation to separate the maintenance from the reconstructing. You know, because everybody that pays that $2.50 or whatever it is gonna think that's the full Monty for everything, you know, I mean, that's everything. And then all of a sudden the special assessment project comes
Right.
along, and like, well, why am I paying this $2.50, you know? But that's, the reconstruction projects, there's no way you could even set a per footage and capture that way. And part of the reason is, you know, you look at, say you try to implement something like that, what the argument's gonna be is, well, why collect my money now and I'm not benefiting from the improvements? I'd rather get the improvements done than pay for them then, you know?
But
That's the other.
isn't that what we're saying though, by this, I mean, and maybe I'm just not understanding it, but, you know, when we look at this memo, it's to help reconstruct streets. It's not maintenance.
And maybe that's.
And that's how I'm explaining it, yes. And I'll go back a little bit to the survey we did on Lennox 2035. My rationale for pursuing it as a reconstruction was that there was at least some appetite in that survey for linear street feet. Whereas when it came to special assessments, far less support for it in that survey. I think there's a fair amount of, I would just call it confusion in terms of, you know, terminology between maintenance and reconstruction, new streets, who pays what, how long do I have to pay it. I think there's a fair amount of confusion there, just in regular taxpayer fees. I don't know if there's any hope to change that, unless, you know, people start personally feeling it, quite honestly. You know, if you've been special assessed for your street, you know, I was special assessed this much, I either paid it off or had it added to my taxes for 10 years, plus interest.
Yeah.
And street maintenance fee is something that's entirely new to what we're talking about.
I think where the confusion, Chad, is coming from, I go back to the mill and overlay projects. Really, this 250 is set up to be able to save for that project. Well, you're gonna end up with a fairly large, and you're not gonna do mill and overlay project potentially. The first one you might do is a Central Basin 1, and that's maybe 10 years out. So you're gonna have this pot of money growing on you, theoretically save in itself for mill and overlay projects. And I think the idea is to try to use some of that today to catch up on some of the reconstruction projects.
What did Hartford do? I mean, did they do a
Hartford did a
combination of
special
things?
assessment. They didn't actually implement a, maintenance fee. They're actually just thinking about it now. But they did special assessments for all the projects.
100%
And then they parlayed them with,
projects.
with grants from the
Grants.
SRF program, you know.
Didn't they lock some sort of pricing in for a long,
What's that?
didn't they lock in some better pricing since? they're
So,
doing it?
so what they did is they had a similar experience when they first started doing their projects. They did the special assessments, and it varied all over the board how much the rate was per foot per person. So like one property owner paid $60 a foot, one person paid $50 a foot. And then the next year was a different contractor, maybe a different bidding situation, and then they had different rates. So the council at that time decided to just make a flat fee of it. So they looked at the average and said the average was $60 a foot. Well, then they came and said, well, we want to incentivize people to sign petitions to bring their projects forward, and they capped it at $49.50, just below $50. And so, and as long as you sign a petition, you get that rate, and they'd hold that rate for you. So they really tried to incentivize people to come in and do that. But again, they were parlaying those projects with their sewer and water projects through the DNR and getting grants to help supplement their half of it. What's that?
That's not an option for us.
It is, it sure is. What I've noticed in your community, like in Hartford back then, they had all gravel streets. They didn't have curb and gutter here, they didn't have some asphalt coats here. You're in a situation where you got curb and gutter that people will pay for, you have some asphalt that some people would pay for, so now it's not as easy to just do a one flat fee because, people feel there's still value left in those facilities where they just put in some expenses in there that it's just not quite the same situation.
Get some sewer and water that everybody's paid for
Yeah,
certain people.
yeah.
What about T? Are you familiar with what they did?
I'm not sure what they're doing, but Del Rapids just they're doing a big project. They sectioned off a section of town, like you were saying, and said we're gonna do this area and their special assessment.
Parkson did the same thing.
What's that?
Parkson did the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, is that something that we could do, like?
For you guys, I really think that's the best route, is to just find an area that you want to.
Well, and just start, and then just tell people, hey, this is what we're doing this year, next year, it's gonna be here, and just tell them what the upfront costs are gonna be. Then they have an option to put some money away.
I just think there's gotta be a special assessment.
No, I'm saying, that's what I'm
Right,
saying.
and I think that's gonna be the fairest way to do it, and I think that, and then we find a maintenance number, and whether it's 2.5, I don't, but, and we may have to start at $1.50 and work our way into some of that as opposed to one big do it. I don't know, but that seems to make the most sense. Just to say, we're gonna just flat fee everybody $260,
Right.
with the people that have had a lot of dollars already spent on their properties, I don't like the double whammy. I've been trying to find the best way to do this. I don't know if there's the best way. It's like the least worst way. Only because of our history, and again, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. It's just, that stuff has happened, it's gone, it's over, and now we've got to move forward with something that just makes sense. And I can apologize till I'm blue in the face, but that it happened, it's terrible.
Special assessment seems like a no-brainer, honestly, when you consider when the work would be completed, it would be in most areas of need, which then the appetite for a special assessment's wide open because they're driving through mud holes every spring. It's easy. And then the neighborhoods that have been recently redone aren't on the agenda for years.
Right.
And so then that special assessment's long since passed. And now there's, again, an opportunity to use it for those roads when that time comes around. Having a road maintenance fee, I think is relevant, but I think we need to see what we're really looking at here for need on road maintenance, because the numbers are kind of jumping around here as to what's what, and I think we need to start low and figure out what it's gonna take to get road maintenance rolling here, and something that doesn't give us a real bad taste in people's mouths. One, you guys mentioned talking to some of the folks in your wards and some of the feedback you've gotten. One of the things I hear often is my taxes are really high already, and I don't see my roads getting any better. Why would I want to pay more taxes? So if we come in robust at a stout number, that's a tough pill for people to swallow. If we come in with a number that's tolerable, 75 cents, I don't know that gets anything accomplished. That's what I want to know is how do those numbers play out in conjunction with special assessment?
I would, in spirit of the least worst way, something is better than nothing.
Right.
And that's, I think, has some relevance.
You mentioned it's an annual renewal, so then we get to see what it performs at and how it looks and what we have accomplished, what's in the kitty, and then take a good hard look at what is the next step.
And do we have a section of town that we know the utilities are good under to where we could special assess next year or put that out there to start getting those
Somewhat.
better?
There are some areas that we, honestly, the sewer television project's gonna tell us more about that than we can guess at.
Yeah, and
But based on age, there are areas of town where one could assume they're better.
yeah, I mean, North Normal area, that stands out to me as an area where there's just a lot of improvements that could be done out there.
Like
We
you
tried
got underground improvements?
Both.
We tried doing an assessment project up there about 6 years ago, and it got protested. So again, the council tried to do the resolution of necessity for that area, and it got shot down by people up there. But again, when we start talking special assessments, I mean, I think you can get your community to agree to that policy, I think that's great, but any special assessment project I've been involved with, people will never want that project when you wanna do it. And so, you have to be ready to possibly override a protest from your constituents out there. And then there's also some strategies of trying to, if you know where you got support, and you know where you don't have support, you try to make that one project to offset we did that a lot in Hartford, just to get all those streets done.
There's some positives here. I mean, traditionally we take in about, 300 grand a year in Central Penny, give or take. It's gotta be a dual prong approach, right? If we just had that $300,000 a year, as Stacy mentioned, for roads like it was intentioned, we're in a lot better spot. We're carving money out for ambulance. Alan's doing a fantastic job. That's come a long ways and it'll continue to get better. I think where you're going, Bill, is let's free up all that second penny to do reconstruction and figure out what maintenance. Whatever that is, you said 75 cents, whatever. I don't know. I wouldn't be ready to vote on it tonight. That's just my personal opinion.
I would say we just need, let's say we eventually move forward with whatever that assessment may be. But we lay out a plan on, we can still move forward with a plan on where we're gonna go first, where we're gonna go second, based on that, and come up with an amount that makes sense. And talk to some other people in your ward about, why we're doing what we're doing. I don't think anybody's gonna, you're always gonna have some that are gonna complain about the linear fee just for maintenance, but we gotta maintain. That's just gonna save us money in the long run. But I think we have to move forward with a plan on where we're gonna start first and how can we, and get a feel for those areas and tying in those that really wanna do it with those that don't and try to get this done.
But I guess what I'm hearing tonight, the plan is probably fairly significant to how we move forward. Not only what streets we're looking at, what improvements need to be made in those areas, whether it's surface or underground utility, and then figuring out, here's the structured payment for how we're going to do this, how we propose to pay for this improvement.
And what are your views on, because I've heard this from a number of people, like when we do new projects like this, sidewalk is going in.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I've heard that resoundingly. Again, Central Basin 1,
That mistake was made once. It can't happen again.
and some of the stuff on Fourth, there's no sidewalk. On Garfield, there's no sidewalk. And I don't know how in the world they push that through with allowing that. Just, you're gonna put sidewalk in because it's a safety issue. And we're gonna have people walking on sidewalks.
Well, it's gotta be a standard one. It's just like
Sure it
over here
does.
at these storage units where whenever you build on there, you're supposed to put curb, gutter, asphalt. When you approve it, and
Right.
Yeah, a fine member of our community wrote a letter to the editor of the paper that was published here last week and mentioned how a complete road includes sidewalks. And I think we all agree with that concept.
I think we need to have a 2035 part two where we say we are gonna do something, and then educate from there.
Okay. So I think Mitch and I have some work to do. I think start with CIP and even branch out from there.
You want to table this? Or you just
Not
gonna-
figuratively. Again, as a reminder, the reason we're bringing this up now is because by the end of October, we have to have that roll to the county. So if there is a desire to do any maintenance, we have to recommend moving forward with it relatively quickly.
Yes.
Even if it is 75 cents, $1, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and we've badgered so much just between us that I personally think that 250 is where you need to be. Yes, long term, and just the math tells us that, just from how to maintain a road, there's no question in my mind. Now, if you start accepting out streets, or properties, then that number just needs to go up that much more.
Well, the cost to maintain and the cost to build is only gonna increase.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Yeah.
And as long as we can continue to keep taxes under control, our community should grow as well.
Yeah. And when you start, if you're gonna, put a different escalator on commercial, that starts to get complex at some point to administer too, so. I mean, it's a job enough trying to figure out how much frontage is in town, so it's.
Have you seen the software she's looking at?
So if we come back in 2
We'll
weeks,
get it down to the end.
our first meeting in September, let's have a number then. Does that sound fair? Like, we need a number on what you're put in. So talk to your folks and maybe somebody will get zero. So I think, and just, we'll read this second resolution then. So I move to table the current
Second.
resolution.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is tabled. Thank you, Mitch. Personnel policies.
Thank you, Mayor. This was, probably should have been on our old business. We had quite a bit of discussion at the last council meeting on revised personnel policies. I think it seemed to me, at least, maybe council clarify this, it didn't feel as though there was any further work needed on the remote work policy or the police department overtime policy, so I haven't made any revisions there. What we did change in this revision would really key in on that PTO cash out. There's a lot of different discussion. Really the only, if I could call it consensus, or at least majority direction, seems to be at limiting how frequently that PTO could be cashed out voluntarily. So that's been adjusted in this revision. I think there are other revisions that can still be made to this. One of the things that came through at the last meeting was a desire for staff to use as much PTO as they possibly can. We want them to use it, they need that time away. It's good for their well-being and for their work productivity long-term to have that time off. And so you could discourage, through structuring it one way, discourage the use of that cash out as well, to say, you may cash out quarterly or you may cash out annually, but when you do it voluntarily, it's at 50% or 75% of the actual cash value of the PTO. I've seen plenty of policies that structure it that way. I don't think it's terribly unusual. I think one thing to consider is whether you tier that. Do you, for employees that have been here a certain amount of time, is it 50%, and you graduate to 75, and you graduate to 100, or do you make it a flat restriction across the board? So I just want to clarify right now, none of those restrictions are in this draft, but it has been something that since the weekend that I've spoken with a couple of council members about, whether that would be a possibility. I apologize, the draft you're looking at, so it's the last paragraph in 7.2. On my computer, it's highlighted, on board docs, it's not. If you download, instead of view the document, it should highlight it for you. So what we're looking at here is really under 7.2, going to be the last few paragraphs under there. Just kept the maximum carryover at 200, and the involuntary cash out at the end of the year, it remains in there as well.
Anybody have any suggestions on leaving it the way it is, or building on a maximum accrual? Accrual with 300 being the max at 7 years, or what are your thoughts? Like
The
a first
accrual
step
rates,
approach?
I researched the accrual rates to see what's consistent, and in healthcare, this is very consistent with what healthcare does.
Okay.
There is one other document in there, didn't point that out initially. We did reach out to other municipalities. And I went back to some previous conversations I've had with the State City Administrators Association, and included that in there as well.
Can we split out the regular full-time versus the police and ambulance?
That's what I was thinking.
I mean, I'm not a police person and I'm not an ambulance, and I don't want to, I don't envy those positions. I understand the stress, I try to understand the stress of always on call, it seems like, or responding to those types of things. Being a little bit different than, and I don't want to belittle this anyway, than working in an office like myself. Okay, so is that something you consider?
That's a change I'd want to run by council, just to ensure that it's,
Sure.
you know, we want to make sure as many policies as we can are across the board and limit those exceptions based on position. But I think it's certainly something we're considering. That's where we typically see the most difficulty in using those hours.
Right.
Like a 1, 2, 3? Like a 100, 200, 300?
Explain, I'm sorry.
In terms of the maximum accrual for your first 2 years of service would be 100 hours?
Oh, I see, because we've got a 3, 3, and 3,
Right.
and
Or do we make it 180, 220, and 260?
well, those, yeah, that's, the 0 to 2, 300 hours is irrelevant. No, it's not, because in the second year, it could be 360 if you haven't used it out.
Right.
My apologies.
Because 0 to 2, because there's 2 pay periods a month? 2 pay periods a month?
Correct.
So you're looking at almost 14 hours.
Some months there's 3.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's
26 pay periods a year.
I mean, I only take the way I was, and I'm a state employee like Stacy is. I think it was 8 hours, and I'm only paid once a month, but it's 8, and then over a certain time it bumps to 10, and then it maxes out at a number like, I don't know if it's 12 or something, but again, just from my experience.
I'm private sector, so I've got, you know, use it or lose it every year, no carryover period. And it's all based on your number of years of service and how many days you got.
Sure.
I'm private as well, and we allow 200 hours carryover. I work ETO. You allow 200 carryover to a max number? Is your max? 200.
I've seen it before where they allow carryover, but it has to be used by like the end of the first quarter.
Yeah.
The reasoning behind it with my employer is they're publicly traded and variables are not in their appetite at all.
Right.
So they need,
It's a huge amount.
yeah, exactly. They need finality in their budget.
Sure.
And I'm not stuck on 200, I'm just telling you what.
Right.
I know somebody that can carry over 800 hours.
How long is the postal service gonna be around though?
So the carryover though, the 200, basically you can carry over 200 and get paid for everything above that. If you have more than that, is how this is written now. So you're not really losing anything.
Right. They'll earn it back too.
there's no use or lose here, this is, you just get it either as
Yeah.
time or
Correct.
cash money.
So that, does our budget reflect that we would be paying people for roughly a month a year double pay?
Right.
And that's where I only see fire, or
PD and ambulance.
ambulance and PD, you know, falling into this
Mhm.
category. Nothing against anybody else, but I mean, they're the ones that
That's where we have the difficulty.
have a harder time getting time off, because they have to work.
Yeah, no choice.
Whatever.
Which
Why don't I
appreciate
run that
as-
by, Brad, and see what he thinks about that? Since we have it set up separately already, I really don't think there'll be an issue with that. Let's make sure and run through those runs first.
Do we need it to pass the other two items that there's not as much?
I really think we should, especially the police overtime issue. We really need to get that done so that they can apply for their grants for highway traffic.
That's right.
So I would recommend a motion to approve as amended, that's minus the cash out policy changes, to be approving the remote work policy and the police overtime policy, but not the PTO cash out.
Motion and second, any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? As amended. Looking for personnel, so it looks like we, in executive.
I have one quick request before we do. We're scheduled to have a street sewer water committee meeting at 8, and the applicant has patiently been waiting out front. Because I polled the council to see if there's an appetite to cancel that meeting, and since we're going to be an exec for personnel anyway, we simply roll that interview into the full council.
I would say just roll it in full council.
Do you need a motion?
I don't think so.
We got personnel.
Yeah, we do, right, there's nothing else public on that agenda, I don't think it's an issue, so.
Real good.
Are you sure you're still here?
Yeah,
He wants the job.
all right. So, I recommend a motion to enter exec,
So moved.
Second.
and whether there's a 5-minute on that or.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Just a couple.
Yeah, that's good. 2-minute break. Thanks.
Let's talk and see. I didn't know they had a chat. I watched the